Plato's Cave. The allegory of the cave is today's day 2 of Plato. The allegory of the cave is arguably the most important discussion topic in this class this year. So, on the right you see a picture. What the picture is, if you can make it out, on the left side you've got people. They are chained to a wall. Well, here's what the allegory of the cave talks about. This very important theory says our existence is like being chained to the darkness, chained in darkness of a cave, facing a wall. So on the left side of that picture, all these people have all ever seen is, from the outside world, is the shadows that are on the wall in front of them. On the right side, you see people walking by with things in their hands, and the flames are casting shadows on the wall. The people in the cave, they're chained up. All they have ever seen are these wall shadows. And as a result, they don't realize that that's not what life is all about. Their view of existence is limited because it's all you've ever known. That's the basic concept. We're going to watch a brief little video on it and then answer some questions, and then we'll get into a little more detail.
What is reality? Knowledge? The meaning of life? Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean, a climb, a war, a book, a thread, a game, a window of opportunity, or an all too short-lived flicker of flame. 2,400 years ago, one of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth, with their backs to the entrance, unable to turn their heads, and with no knowledge of the outside world. Occasionally, however, people and other things pass by the cave opening, casting shadows and echoes onto the wall the captives face. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing they're perceiving actual entities. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside for the first time. The light hurts his eyes, and he finds the new environment disorienting. When told that the things around him are real, while the shadows were mere reflections, he cannot believe it. The shadows appeared much clearer to him, but gradually his eyes adjust until he can look at reflections in the water, at objects directly, and finally at the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of everything he has seen. The prisoner returns to the cave to share his discovery, but he is no longer used to the darkness and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think the journey has made him stupid and blind, and violently resist any attempts to free them. Plato introduces this passage as an analogy of what it's like to be a philosopher trying to educate the public. Most people are not just comfortable in their ignorance, but hostile to anyone who points it out. In fact, the real-life Socrates was sentenced to death by the Athenian government for disrupting the social order, and his student Plato spends much of the Republic disparaging Athenian democracy, while promoting rule by philosopher kings. With the cave parable, Plato may be arguing that the masses are too stubborn and ignorant to govern themselves. But the allegory has captured imaginations for 2,400 years because it can be read in far more ways. Importantly, the allegory is connected to the theory of forms developed in Plato's other dialogues, which holds that, like the shadows on the wall, things in the physical world are flawed reflections of ideal forms, such as roundness or beauty. In this way, the cave leads to many fundamental questions, including the origin of knowledge, the problem of representation, and the nature of reality itself. For theologians, the ideal forms exist in the mind of a creator. For philosophers of language viewing the forms as linguistic concepts, the theory illustrates the problem of grouping concrete things under abstract terms. and others still wonder whether we can really know that the things outside the cave are any more real than the shadows. As we go about our lives, can we be confident in what we think we know? Perhaps one day a glimmer of light may punch a hole in your most basic assumptions. Will you break free to struggle towards the light, even if it costs you your friends and family? Or stick with comfortable and familiar illusions? Truth or habit? Light or shadow? Hard choices, but if it's any consolation, you're not alone. There are lots of us down here.
So, question number 1. How does the allegory of the cave first come up in the Republic? As a true story about Greek captives in the Peloponnesian War? As a hypothetical thought experiment about how we see the world? Or C, as a description of the ideal prison system? The answer, of course, is B. It's how we see the world. All we know is what cave we've been in, and what cave drawings have been shown to us. Question 2. How did the prisoners respond to being chained? A. They struggled to break free and scream for help. B. They sadly and passively accept their fate. C. They are unaware that their situation is anything but normal. The correct answer is, of course, C. How would you know that your cave shadows are not other people's cave shadows? How would you know that what is happening to you is anything other than normal if that's all you've ever known? Question 3. How does the prisoner respond to seeing the world outside the cave for the first time? A. He is disoriented and has a hard time believing that it's real. B. He's overjoyed and exhilarated by the new possibilities. C. He's disappointed at how dull and repetitive it is. The answer is of course, A. You're disoriented when you're told that the things that you've held in value, your cave shadows, when you're told that they have no value, it's disorienting. It's not something that you can understand right away because it goes against all that you've ever known. Next question. Why would the other prisoners resist being freed after seeing the first prisoner return? A. They hear about the dangers of the outside world and decide to remain safely inside. B. They think the returned person has been debilitated by the experience. Or C. They are afraid that their captors will hunt them down if they escape. The answer is B. Even if somebody comes back and says, listen, the things you've believed in, and all of your opinions and all of the things you spend your time on, they have no value. They are empty cave shadows. The real world is out there. Well, most people would say, shut up, I'm staying in my cave. And I believe the final question, which of the following is not one of the themes of the allegory? A. The basis of our everyday knowledge. B. Symbols and representations versus the real things they represent. Or C. Ethical issues regarding the humane treatment of prisoners. The one that's not a theme is C. It has nothing to do with prisons, it's just an allegory. But in terms of A, our everyday knowledge, that is determined by what cave we are in. And obviously symbols and representations, money is something what everybody wants, but what does money actually represent? It represents freedom, and it represents being able to have the type of life we like. So, Plato said, as we talked about, if a chained person went out into the real world, they're going to be frightened. They'd want to return back to the cave. Those who are most enlightened, who actually opened their mind, would finally see the world as it truly is. Most people don't do this. In other words, you'd go out and, oh crap, that's a tree. The idea being the real world, for instance, if your whole world is focused on social media, if you were to pick your head off of that screen for a second and look around you, you would see that social media is just a window into the world that is around us all the time completely. It's unnecessary. Plato said that if people return to the cave and you tell people who are still chained up that the things they believe are wrong, they aren't going to like it. Look what happened to Socrates. So what the allegory of the cave ultimately is doing, it's looking at how ignorant we are because we are trapped in the conventional ethics formed by society. Conventional ethics meaning the ways of living, the ways of belief, are caused by the societies we live in. If our societies are flawed, so will our belief system. Our view of the world and our reality is limited to whatever we've been exposed to in our cave. The way you think what you believe in, that's because you were taught in your cave. There's nothing wrong with that. Some of you maybe have seen the film The Matrix. What if I told you to read Plato's Allegory of the Cave? And in the film, they give you a choice between taking the red pill, the sometimes painful truth of reality, or the blue pill, to remain in the blissful ignorance of illusion. By definition, the cave is living with the blue pill. For those who want to see what is true in life, to look into the sun in the Allegory of the Cave, and to take the red pill in the film The Matrix, and we'll watch a clip of it later in the year, means you're actually opening your eyes for the first time and seeing what's real, not just what's a cave shadow. I like this image right here because if you look, it's similar to the first one, but if you look at the things being presented to us, CNN, MTV, NBC, we are actually, if you watch the news, all you know is the view of those newscasters, those opinion makers. You don't really know the facts or even the news. You are being conditioned through the cave shadows of that news outlet. Plato felt that we are prisoners of our culture. Because if our culture says that life is a certain way, we're going to believe that life is that way. Agree or disagree that we are basically stuck thinking the way we do because of our culture. Now, I'm not saying that everybody doesn't like purple shirts that say pink, or people would rather wear ripped jeans because it's better to look like a homeless person, but that's what our society has placed before us. And in that way, we are condemned to be prisoners of our culture. How does where and when you grow up affect your shadows? That's a political cartoon. Obviously, it's of people of individual islands of cell phones. And it's interesting as a teacher, if I end the class early, back in the day, kids would talk and I'd have to tell them to get back to work. Today, kids are quiet as they all look into their individual devices. That is a cave shadow of growing up in this era. Your grandparents did not have to deal with social media. Your grandparents maybe had to deal with big afros. Because if you grew up in a different time period, different clothing styles, be it bell bottoms or hairstyles, are going to be in vogue, in fashion. And those are examples of your shadows. Maybe you've got awesome hair like these people. This is caber tossing. This is in Scotland. The guys wear kilts. They carry around a big, not all day long, but just as the sport, they carry around a big telephone pole. They run a distance and then they heave it, yelling hernia. No, they don't yell that. That is an important sport. That's a cultural thing. People grow up learning and wishing that they too can throw a big telephone pole. And here's actually what it looks like, to think I'm not making it up. This is something you would be growing up and your father would say, one day you too will throw the telephone pole. Well, this is foolish, right? And how about this? This is curling. Now, there's nothing wrong with that if you want to have a broom and on ice. And I mean, there's rules, and I've watched curling. It's pretty damn cool. It's easy to look at these sports, quote unquote, and say they're foolish. But if you grew up living and being taught that these things are really important, then you would ultimately believe in them. They are the cave shadows. If you're taught that watching people run around with the skin of a pig and watching millionaires tackle each other, then that's fine. This is James Naismith. He is the father of basketball, and here pictured are the two things, the basket and the ball. Here's them playing as they run around throwing the ball in the basket, and then they get the ladder. Well, I'm not trying to say anything, but for those of you who love basketball, isn't basketball simply a quote-unquote sport where we throw a ball in a hole? But today, LeBron James wants you to drink Sprite, and he's a multi-millionaire because we in our society think throwing a ball in a hole has value. It's just as cool as in Scotland if you can throw a big telephone pole. And then think about our values in America on top of it. The 4th of July. How many hot dogs can we jam down our face? And people get into this thing. That's an example of a cave shadow that may be slightly showing the materialistic. I mean, when people all over the world don't have enough to eat and we're gorging on hot dogs. I'm sorry, it's making me sick. Bowling. I used to love bowling. I'm lying, actually. But what's bowling? Look at this guy. He's got the special rented shoes. He's got great form. He's coming in. He's his arm swinging. He's got proper rotation on the ball. Look at that thing spin for a strike, we call it. He's got a little wrist brace going on. He's pretty damn skilled at this skilled activity. I mean, he doesn't have like the gutter bumpers on. But when you really look at it, it's just knocking things over with a ball. You can say that bowling or basketball or baseball or anything that we hold in high esteem, we can say that they're great important things, and they are to us because they are cave shadows. They're ultimately unimportant. Are there shallow shadows that our society has fooled you into chasing, which are unimportant? I mean, the whole idea of, I guess it's Cardi B, chirping like a bird there, that's something that thankfully did not catch on to the degree it could have. I mean, there was a day back 1,000 years ago, or 20, where's the beef? There was a Wendy's ad with some old grandma yelling, where's the beef? Saying that Wendy's had bigger hamburgers. And every moron I knew would be yelling, where is the beef? And after a while it got really old. These are just ways that culture kind of takes over common sense from time to time. But are there shallow shadows that our society basically forces us to? You grow up and you want a cell phone because the older kids have a cell phone. I love this picture. Somebody is literally locked in a cave, darkness, and they're using Facebook to see the world. But the door's open. They could just go outside. Social media, by definition, is a shallow is a shallow shadow that our society has taught you is something you should have in your life. The idea of Teen Mom OG, original gangster, the original Teen Mom. I actually saw an interview with a girl who was 12, and she said she could not wait until her next birthday because she aspired to be on Teen Mom OG. The need of fame to be on television, famous for having a kid when you're 13. Or this picture, which is slightly objectionable, which obviously shows the addictions of cell phones. Why do we get so fooled by these shadows? Is it better to not know the truth? In the allegory of the cave, Plato runs back in, or the character runs back in and tries to tell everybody else all the things that they have done are empty and the real value is out in the world. And those people don't want to know it. Is it better not to know the truth? Is it better to take the red pill and just be blissfully unaware? Are we all living in a cave? Here's the discussion part. Are we all living in a cave? Is there a greater reality which we are not aware of? In other words, if you're taught to live on a farm and your day-to-day operation is keeping the cattle alive, then that's your whole life. Somebody else could never in their whole life step on a farm, and their cave shadows, their things that are important in their life, are going to be completely different. Not just the things they do, but their belief systems are going to be entirely different. Is reality really just an infinite number of different caves with different regional cultural opinions? In other words, if I leave, for instance, I live 40 miles away from the school. When I moved to this school after teaching in another school 40 miles away, the culture, the music, the style was different. Literally a car drive, and there's 2 different caves in Plainfield than Shoreline, Connecticut. And it's interesting to see the things that individual groups think to be true. They only think they're true because they're the only thing they've ever been exposed to in their caves. If our cave shadows are empty and meaningless, then what should we really be focusing on according to Plato? Plato can obviously say, and in my story, kids usually get really upset in class because I'm going to make fun of every sport and everything they find valuable. Not to say that sports and recreational things don't have value, but the amount of value we place in them is slightly foolish at times. If you're using sports to learn about teamwork, if you're using sports to get into college, if you're learning sports because you love the sport, those are all great things. I'm not minimizing them. But then again, you could just throw a telephone pole and say the same things. In my old school, crew was a sport. Now, crew, C-R-E-W, is rowing boats. That's not a sport that you would see in Plainfield. But if you lived in the town that I grew up in, that was the best way to get into college, is being a crew athlete. What should you be focused on according to Plato? You should be focused on things that have a little more value. Maybe things other than materialism, other than your reputation. Is it sometimes better or safer to stay happy in the cave? I'll be honest, I used to enjoy bowling to some degree, and then after being introduced to philosophy, I realized that bowling was an empty activity. Now, if I want to go out with a bunch of people and eat crappy food and wear cool rented shoes and throw a ball down to knock some pins over, that's nothing wrong with that. But once you've been exposed to how empty it is, maybe you stop having fun in these mindless activities. Our final slide, we can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. Men being afraid of the light meaning people who don't want to actually look at the light of truth and look at how empty a lot of their cave shadows are, being the things we spend our life focused on, being the beliefs we have. Please write journals, and we will discuss more of Plato next class.